I want to call this.
Did it start at what time did this start?
This one will start at 2:30.
Oh, okay, got it. So there's your list, and then I'm going to pass out here is the.
Yep. All right, we are on the record now for our child care work session. I apologize for those who came. We ran a little bit late in our executive session with regard to litigation. So we're going to quickly go around the table here and introduce people, starting with Mr. Gates.
Dean Gates, City Council.
Fred Dice.
Forrest Dunbar.
Pete Peterson.
That was Dick Traney. Okay, so thank you all. This is our last meeting of the day. We might go a little bit past 3:30 because we are running a little late. So I put this on the agenda. When Ms. LaFrance and I had originally put forward the child care ordinance that we subsequently withdrew, we received a lot of communications from folks, or I did at least, and perhaps Ms. LaFrance did as well, stating that basically that they could not afford, or they were struggling with affording child care in Anchorage. And from that, I ended up having a conversation with Ms. Berglund from THREAD, which is an advocacy organization, from several members of the industry who reached out to me, and then also with the Department of Health and Human Services. So today we're going to hear 3 presentations. They don't have to be super formalized, so I believe that Stephanie's is a PowerPoint related to affordability and accessibility with child care in Anchorage. And there is no ordinance that's currently pending, but it's just a conversation that I wanted to get going. We haven't had during my several years on the Assembly. So with that, Stephanie. Oh, there's Stephanie. Hey, sorry to keep you guys waiting, but we appreciate the introduction and your presentation.
You want me to move out of here?
No, you're perfect. Thank you.
You said I'm what?
You are just fine. You're perfect right there. Thank you.
Oh, I thought you said I was perfect.
So, Chair Dunbar, if it's okay with you, I'll just introduce our folks real quick. So, as we know, my name is Melinda Freeman. I'm the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services. So thank you for inviting these 2 fabulous professionals and our child care provider to the presentation. We have 2 sections to the presentation this afternoon. We have Kathy Lynch, who is our Program Manager for Child Care Licensing at DHHS. And we have Stephanie Berglund, the Executive Director of THREAD. And so we'll start off with having Kathy present to you what is the role of child care licensing related to safety and security for our children in care.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for having us. I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview. I'm not sure how much everyone knows about our program here within the municipality and the health department. We are child care licensing, and we receive a grant from the state of Alaska under the Department of Public Assistance. We are authorized to enforce statutes and regulations under 7 AAC 57, 7 AAC 10, 47, and 45, or 47, and 32, and 4705. We're given that authority through a pass-through grant. I just wanted to touch real quickly that in 2004, we adopted a new child care code that included both inspecting child care homes and centers. Prior to that, it was only centers. And for the last 12 years, for 12 years, we had the authority to use our regulations too, as long as we met or exceeded the state regulations. So, and many of you were on the Assembly at the time, so in 2016, our code was repealed and reenacted, and we adopted the state statutes and regulations and kept only the portions that still exceeded the state regulations. And with that adoption, it requires a lot of changes now for our program. We are now required to adopt their forms, their policies and procedures, in the way that we do our inspections and conduct investigations, everything. So we meet regularly with the Child Care Program Office on implementing these new changes and procedures and making sure we're on track with the way the state is doing things. And the purpose of that was to, that wherever you are in the state, the child care inspection process would look alike. and they wanted that to happen. So, as I said, we license facilities, we open new facilities, and we monitor currently licensed facilities, both homes and centers. I have my notes, and I might have to refer back and forth here a little bit. I just wanted to touch, well, it'll be on the next slide. But we also investigate reports of concern that we receive from community members. It could be complaints against current licensed facilities. It could be complaints against unlicensed facilities. So we do have to do a lot of planning to inspect and make those complaint investigations. We currently have 12 full-time staff. Myself, the supervisor, we have 2 lead licensing specialists, 1 office associate, and 8 regular licensing specialists. The leads help me a lot in evaluating the documentation that the specialists submit and providing consultation to the staff as well as helping them license and open up new programs. So our specialists, we receive, review, and follow up on new applications. As they come in, we provide technical assistance to the applicants. We also coordinate with agencies within the community, fire department, land use and zoning, food safety and sanitation for clarification on their regulations as well. What did I just do? Oh, did I already go one too many? No.
You're on slide 4, so you want to go.
Well, how did I manage to get through?
There you go.
So that was our role. So I got to move forward now, right? Okay, there we go. So the licensing sets the foundation for quality care. We do criminal history checks. That's a requirement that every single individual who has contact with children, is a caregiver or a member in a household 16 and older, must have a criminal history check. They must receive a provisional clearance through the state of Alaska, New Alaska background check system before they can have contact with children. And that is, it's been a process all along, but it has been a change right now, because in the past, child care centers could hire someone as long as they had a clean background check through the interested person report that they received. Now they have to get that provisional clearance, and so that has delayed a little bit as far as hiring staff, because oftentimes they need people's feet on the ground in classrooms the next day when someone quits. But we do make sure that is completed, and during our inspections of facilities, we're checking to make sure that they are following protocol on that. We also need agency approvals, so when an application comes in, if it's for a center, we are looking to see that they have land use approval, fire approval, food safety if they're going to have a food service. So sometimes that takes a little bit of a lengthy process to get that done, and sometimes we're going to have another slide that talks about some of the barriers to getting these approvals. Administrators have to meet certain qualifications, so when the application comes in, we have to review their resume, we have to get references on them. They have to have X number of 12 credits in the early childhood or a degree in some of the related fields. We also request that they submit emergency and evacuation plans. They have to have a plan how they're going to safely evacuate children. And they also have to show us in writing the exit routes. That has to also be approved by the fire department as well. And they also have to have a written emergency plan. I'm trying to just give you a quick nutshell, of some of the things that we have to look at that are part of the application process. We have to make sure that they are considering different types of emergencies, how they're going to evacuate all children safely, and how they're going to contact the fire department or the other, whatever the emergency is, and contact and get children safely back to their parents. We are also doing health and safety. They have to meet certain health and safety standards. When we go out into the programs, we're inspecting every classroom used for children, just to ensure that it meets the minimum health and safety standards. And we have a checklist that we go by. And some of the things we're looking at is for hazard-free, to ensure that outlets are covered. A simple thing that you wouldn't think of in your home, but children poke little things in outlets. So we're looking to see that they're safe, that they have those covered and inaccessible, that cords are inaccessible to children. We're looking to make sure cleaning supplies and in homes, bathroom products and things that you would normally just leave out are put away, safely stored, inaccessible, either locked or in a locked cabinet or above counter height. We're looking to see that proper hand washing is being done. That prevents, number one way to prevent the spread of disease, and so we're constantly looking to see and educating them, about when to wash hands and how often long you should be washing your hands, and also about making sure that the caregivers are encouraging children to wash their hands. We're looking to see that proper diapering procedures are followed. This is one way to prevent a lot of spread of disease. And we're looking at nutrition. We're looking to see that children are fed healthy meals, and that the code requirements that they do follow the Child and Adult Care Food Program, and serving certain components. Many of them are on a food program getting subsidized for that, but often they are not. And even parents who bring in their lunches, the program is still responsible to make sure the parent is supplementing all the food components required. And drinking water is a big one, that they're offering water to children at a frequency so that, to relieve thirst. Supervision, ratios, attendance records, these all fall hand in hand. We're looking to see that children are being supervised, that they're not being left alone, that even if you are in the classroom, I'm looking this way and I don't have 10 kids behind me, and that's not supervising children. We're looking that they're maintaining ratios. We have ratio requirements in code, and that's a serious violation, and that we also document if they are out of ratio when we are in a classroom. And we also review attendance records to make sure that all staff and children are signed in. So in the event of an evacuation, they take those attendance records with them, and that helps them know that they have evacuated all the children. We also inform, we educate, and we empower our providers. We provide technical assistance either in the office, over the telephone, or when we are outside, either doing a pre-licensing visit, orientation, or when we're conducting an inspection. And oftentimes, if we see where they're struggling or they need additional training hours, we do refer them to THREAD, the statewide Child Care Resource and Referral Network. And now I just want to share quickly the number of facilities we have currently licensed. We have 264 total centers and homes in Anchorage, and that breaks down to 119 centers with a total capacity of 8,967, and 145 homes for a total capacity of 1,079. When you see these numbers, that doesn't mean every single slot is filled, but it does tell you that many slots are available, and depending on the choices of the program, whether it's their determination whether or not they may fill all those slots. And over here we just have a quick pie chart that shows that 91% of the licensed facilities are here in Anchorage, and 7% in Eagle River, 1% in Chugiak and Girdwood.
Can I ask a question
Sure.
before we go on? So it looks like maybe this is later on. There's about 10,000 slots then total, if you go back. Do we know what our vacancy rates are?
No, I don't have that data. I don't know exactly if that's anything.
We know that they're really low. And I'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
So of our licensed centers, the other things that the capacity and services they provide is we do have 50 licensed sites who are specifically school age only programs. And 43 of these are year round for a total capacity of 3,164. And when you ask for an example of what the vacancy factor is, I know that a lot of our school age programs may have a license capacity of 80, but they don't go near filling all 80 slots. But they have a larger number for winter break, summer break, when they combine school sites so that they have enough space for children. And then we have 8 programs that are summer only that just operate for the summer break. And then there is 26 licensed sites who do offer an infant program component, and that would have available 317 spaces for infants under the age of 12 months. So I just pulled the data for under 12 months, which is considered an infant. And then in home capacity and services provided, we have 145 licensed sites right now for childcare homes. 71 of those are licensed for 24-hour care, and 11 have a license up to 10 p.m. Anything between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. is considered nighttime care, and they have to meet fire requirements as well. Even though they are licensed for 24-hour care, not all facilities have children in care at those later evening hours, but they want the option available. And then we have services for school age. There are who only provide school age services, and that is only 3 licensed sites that are just specifically for school age children in childcare homes, and so there would be 22 spaces. And as a side note as well, in childcare homes, they can only be licensed up to 8 children, and that includes any of their own children living in the home. So they also have services for infant care. Of those 8 children, they can have no more than 3 under 30 months of age, and only 2 non-walking. And so I took the number and determined that there should be about 262 spaces for infants under the age 12, assuming that by 12 months they would be walking. And so that's how I came up with that number. And then just to talk a little bit about some of the barriers to opening a child care center is location, location, location. And they're basically, I'm going to follow my notes here a little bit. Oftentimes we have many inquiries come in. We have individuals interested in opening a center, and so they call our department. They might talk to one of the specialists, and oftentimes we refer them to our website, or we can give them the handout. But on the website, it gives them a lot of detailed information and useful information on what it takes to open a child care center. And one of the main difficulties is finding a location that meets land use and zoning. And I just put in here the chart that we give them that shows them they can go on, they can find out how the property is zoned, and then it will tell you whether that property is permitted, it's not permitted for child care, it needs a conditional use if you wanted to use it for child care, or it needs an administrative site plan review. And so they have to do the research. And if they think that they want to go forward, then they're going to have to apply for that. And that can be, from what we've heard, can be anywhere from $3,600 to up to $10,000 to get an administrative site plan review or a conditional use. And that's no guarantee that it will be approved once the review is done. And so that's a lot of cost to a program just wanting to start out. And it also can take several months to even go through one of these processes. And additional things that could be barriers with zoning is the parking requirements. If you want to open a center, they have a formula they use to determine the capacity of the program and how many parking spots a place would need. And they also require specific landscape and dumpster screening, the building, the play yard, and the parking all need to be on one lot. Then other barriers could be fire prevention requirements. Most of our centers have to have a sprinkler system. That can get very costly. And so when a person starts to think about trying to find a location and starts reading, it's like, whoa, how much is this going to cost me before I even can open the doors? And affordability. Are they buying or are they leasing? Leasing in town, that we found I didn't get a lot of numbers, but I can tell you a lot of our larger programs, it starts at like $10,000 to lease a place. Yes.
Training, Mr. Dice.
Mr. Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we have mandatory automatic sprinklers in these child care centers? In other words, things on the ceiling, like you
Right.
see here,
Most of
are
them
they
do.
required?
Yes, they are by fire.
Okay.
The fire, and so we don't go in and say what they have, but fire would go in and tell them, and they could go through a plan review process as well to determine if the fire department says they need a sprinkler.
Thank you.
Mr. Dice.
Thank you. I hope at the end of your presentation, you're going to tell us clearly, simply, what we can do to help.
Well, through the whole presentation.
Yes?
Stephanie and others will speak on some of that, how.
So the zoning is a problem. And there's dumb things in there that are probably unintended to keep child care places opening in places where they'd be very safe, including the industrial zoning. All industrial zonings don't have toxic fumes and loud noises and big trucks. And it's just an absurd blanket sort of thing that governments tend to do that need to be some way to work it out. So I hope you do have a list of the barriers that we can eliminate that will help it be more affordable.
I'll say, Mr. Dyson, and you could, I'm just reading ahead a little bit, there's some of that, but I don't intend this to be the only work session we have on this topic. So this is a little bit of a preliminary meeting, and we'll hopefully continue down that road, because that's exactly what I want to get to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's continue with the presentation, please.
Okay. So then affordability, I already mentioned the cost of leasing a place or even purchasing one is astronomical, and even the cost of insurance. Every program is required to carry general liability insurance, and we have minimum requirements for that as far as the per occurrence and the aggregate, and it varies depending on the size of program. Again, education requirements for administrators and staff. Some think they can just open up a center and say, well, you need to have either 12 credits in early childhood, or you need a degree in a related field, or at least a child development associate for now. And then again, we already mentioned background requirements. Some think they can get through it and they find out, oh, I've got something in my background that's surfaced. And it may make them ineligible unless they can go through the background variance process.
Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, and you probably have no way of knowing this because it's hard to know what you don't know, but do we have people that are operating child care centers in their homes that aren't licensed that we don't know about?
We do.
I think we do.
And the only way we know about it usually is if we receive some type of report of concern that something's happened there, or some neighbor knows, well, they should be licensed, and so then we would get the phone call, then we would investigate it, and we have licensed many programs over the years who we have received those reports, we've educated them and told them to continue. You need to either reduce to stay within the limits, just like speeding ticket, or you get a license so that you can continue to watch this number of children.
Great, thank you, Mr. Peters. Mr. Dyson.
Yeah, so you can accuse me of gender prejudice. My experience, which is extensive, is most women and virtually all mothers are great problem solvers. And there's quite a few informal co-ops going on for transportation and house child care and all those kind of things that work very well. And I wouldn't be surprised if some money changes hands to help subsidize it and so on and so forth. And the kids are, nobody guards kids better than mothers, and hopefully some fathers. But we want to be really careful to not mess with things that people are doing on their own, with loading them up with stupid things.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Let's continue with the
Okay,
presentation.
and I'm just about finished. And then another requirement for a center is that you do have to have a playground on the property adjacent to the building. That is a municipal requirement in our code. And then some of the barriers for a child care home, again, if you're renting a property, you need to get property owner's permission to operate a child care. And so that's part of the application process, that they do ask their landlord or property management company for permission to make sure that they don't go through the whole process only to find out you can't do that here, and they're shut down. Also, there's homeowners association and covenants that do restrict some subdivisions for providing any kind of a business out of that subdivision. So we have them check first to make sure these aren't going to be barriers before they go through the entire application process. And again, I've already mentioned background requirements more than once, but all household members 16 and older in the home do have to have a background check. And sometimes they do come back with barriers from the FBI that might have been 20 years ago, but they still count as a barrier. And then they would have to stop the process, go through a variance process that's lengthy to see if it would pass through the background check program before they could move on. Or their other option is just to stop and not apply for a license, or ask the household member to move out. And if it's your spouse or your children, you're probably not going to do that. And then, again, there's lack of experience in education and just understanding the process of what it means to be licensed. They'll come into our office, I want a license. I want to do child care, I want a license. Well, we just don't hand you a piece of paper. It's, you know, so we go through that process with them and give them the application packet. And some of them just struggle trying to understand how to write their own policies and everything that goes with it. Yes?
Mr. Lowe.
So the background requirements, what kind of stuff?
Part.
Background requirements.
I don't have that whole list, but there's a long list of barriers. If you have an assault charge, if you've, not just a simple speeding ticket, but if you had a vehicle accident and you injured another person in the accident, that would be a vehicle assault or something. Of course, if there's any child abuse, that's a big one, you know, definitely a barrier. Murder, theft in the first or second, those are just some, the list is quite lengthy.
What about drug possession?
It can be, yes, depending on what the charge was. And again, we don't make those decisions. That's out of our, it's all in the New Alaska Background Check System, checks all that. And they're the experts in the field, and so they just go through that, and that helps them. They let the individual know what exactly the charge is, what the barrier is.
Mr. Dyson and Mr.
Yeah, you
Gates.
said charges, did you mean convictions?
Convictions, yes. And again, the background check program makes that determination. Because sometimes they're charges and sometimes they are convictions.
Yeah, you need to see if the house has a record of having meth labs there. It's kind of hard on kids.
Huh.
Okay.
Hopefully that doesn't happen.
So-
Mr. Gates has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I recall right, the list of barrier crimes is set out in state statute regulation. I can find that and forward it to some motions to what ultimately like.
If you'd like, that does mean that it means that it's out of our control as well. We have to require changes.
Right,
to state
changes
law.
in the state law.
Could we go to the next
And then this
slide?
is the last slide, and just in conclusion, everything we do, whether it's on the applicant side or on our side, there's a tremendous amount of work involved in deadlines to meet by regulation and policy. We take in many inquiries daily. We are conducting inspections at least 2 times a year, and I have more conclusion notes, but I know we're in a hurry. And then again, all the complaint investigations and the coordination that we do involving complaint investigations with the police department, Crimes Against Children, Alaska Cares, Office of Children's Services, our food safety, our local agencies, all that, it all takes a lot of work and talent and attention to detail from our staff. And the bottom line is I just wanted to read what I wrote here, or at least refer to my notes. We do value each child in our community and want to see that each one has access to quality child care. And fortunately, when our providers have questions or parents call us with concerns, or we are seeing a program struggling and needing additional assistance or resources or training in consultation, we can refer them to THREAD, our statewide resource and referral agency, and they have provided many of our programs excellent assistance in and tools to make them successful. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. We have a question for Mr. Gates.
Yes,
Statement.
thank you. Regarding the barrier crimes list being out of municipal control, I don't think that's correct. I believe that we have a referral from the state to monitor our child care licensing program. Locally, we have adopted, reference the state statutes and regulations. We could, I think, not be as restrictive. We could be more restrictive than state law. We could, I believe, and I will verify this, add to the list of barrier crimes in our code, in addition to those that are in the state statute.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. So at this point, I want to go to the industry representative, and then we'll go to THREAD. I just want to make sure that they are able to speak. So I have a handout here that you should all have received from Ms. Tia Hollywood, and she is was a licensed child care provider. I don't believe is she here? No. Okay, so Tia is not here because she couldn't make it today. And so her and I have been in email conversation, and she said, sort of ironically and understandably, most child care providers cannot come and present at a work session during the day. But is this Eubanks Ohana? Yes. So Christina Eubanks Ohana has offered to provide some testimony from an industry representative, although, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Eubanks Ohana, there is no sort of industry trade association or anything like that can provide sort of a more unified voice. You are sort of speaking on your own behalf.
On my own behalf, yes.
Yeah. And that's sort of one of the unfortunate things I found when I first got in the assembly was back in 2016 was interested in this, I reached out and tried to find like a trade association essentially to talk to, and then one doesn't exist. And so it's difficult to know kind of what the industry as a whole is interested in. But Ms. Ohana has offered to give testimony, so please.
I would reach out to the Anchorage Association for the Education of Young Children.
Okay.
They are the national local affiliate, and so they have a lot of her early childhood professionals are members there, and so they're an active organization, and they put on an annual early childhood conference in Anchorage every year. So I'm Christina Eubanks Ohana. I'm the executive director of Hillcrest Children's Center. We're celebrating our 50th year as a nonprofit early childhood center located on Government Hill. And then, and so my biggest thing to say is just quality early childhood is just not financially feasible. I've been doing this since '93, and back when I started in Washington State, directors were making money, and they had their own facilities, and they were able to finance a really nice lifestyle on that. And then as codes have changed and cost of everything goes up, that margin has just gone down. And I run a nonprofit, and so it's hired by the parents of the center, and so all our money goes back into the facility, and we just end up, and we're one of the more expensive centers in town. And they're just every year we sit there and talk with parents. We're getting ready to do the budget now and have our City Hillcrest meeting, and we run through what everything costs. And every year insurance goes up, all these other things go up, and there's a limit. And so the one thing that doesn't go up is staff wages. And so I've been there 10 years and have yet to get a raise because there isn't the money to do that. And the other thing is, we talked about licensing a new center. We've been there 50-some years. We have lots of alumni, and we're looking at starting a capital campaign because our building is over 50 years old. It's not designed to do what we're doing with it, and you want to provide safe care for children and meet the new requirements that are coming down through the Learn and Grow program, and that costs too much. But with these things, we were working with the pre-development with 4-Acre and Rasmussen Foundation on there, and so much of it was, well, we start doing too many of these things, and you're going to need to trigger everything because we're grandfathered in for so many items, and a lot of it came into the parking lot, and was title something, then I'd have to do a whole bunch of landscaping, which is really great, and I wish we had the funds for, but then we were getting over $1 million capital campaign, and as 4-Acre informed us, we'll be the only one, minus the library out in Talkeetna, starting a capital campaign under this financial realities. And so I think it comes down to, it's parents can't afford to pay more, and we have seen if we've increased our quality, the economic diversity in our center continue to go down. Because if you are taking families who are on child care assistance, they cannot afford the gap between what child care assistance believes that child care should cost on average and what it is that we are offering, just to offer what I find a minimally acceptable quality program.
So I'll just say on that, if you get a chance to read Tia's writing to us, she flags the same issue about child care assistance. So can you give us a sense of, and I assume it's not uniform across the city, but sort of what you charge and what you think a typical charge is, and then what the typical child care assistance, I assume that's a sliding scale, but what typically the child care assistance is?
Child care max reimbursement rate for an infant in a center in Anchorage is $850. Our infant spots are $1,179, and we're looking at probably a 5% rate increase. Some parents in the audience are going to find out at our meeting next month, because we average at 3 to 5, because every year I don't do 1.25% next year.
And so for you and or people, the other people involved in this, how does one qualify for child care assistance? What are the sort of economic, I assume it's based on income, and if so, what are the upper limits where you can qualify for it?
Well, it depends on your family size, and you can pull the contribution calculator in the spreadsheet up on the state website. I help families try to figure out what they think they're going to get back, and then it becomes a sliding scale from that, depending on what they feel that their copay should be, and then that's just for families who are working. Then you have the welfare to work programs, so these are people who are in job trainings and things like that, and they don't have a copay, but there also is a cap. Like when we take a family like that, we know they can't afford more than $850 because they're trying to get onto work. They often are families who have a hard time maintaining employment because they have children with special needs, which is a whole other different thing. And we are one of the few centers that will accept children with special needs, but there you end up with families who are trying to have high-paying jobs. These children require a lot more resources for them to stay in the workforce. So.
Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Member. For families with multiple children in child care, what is the typical reimbursement? Is there a cap? Or is it like, you mentioned 850
So it'd be,
to you, but
yeah, it would be, so they had like twins, it would be $150 a twin, and then you just have one family copay. So if the family copay is $400, and then the state would pay $400 for one, the $850 for another. But like I said, I charge $1,179, so they're expected to make that difference. And then you have families with multiple kids. And then, I mean, I have families whose bills are, I had one parent who'd always swipe his credit card and be like, that's a second mortgage, that's plane tickets to Europe. Instead, we're growing dendrites.
So we're doing what?
We're growing dendrites, brain.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions for the? So I guess I would like your thoughts on. So you've outlined the problems. Can you drill down a little more specifically on what you think the solutions might be?
So,
and can any of them be done at the municipality, or is it all at the state level?
So I wanted to start this. I'm pro regulations. I started in this field, and you could do corporal punishment in the first venture. I've worked in different places, most of them out of state, where it was just not a good place. So there's reasons that there's for every code. I think some of them can be, and when we were under just the muni, we had a really great working relationship with our licensing agents, and we'd be able to talk through things. So we could figure out something, and they were seen as a resource. As we've moved into the state regs, I will say I never considered leaving this job until I had to deal with the state, and I sat on some work groups with the state members. And their general attitude of disrespect towards providers was offensive. And so their view, I think, is, and you understand, I mean, code is written to cover, you guys, Muni hands us a license, you want to make sure that you're not going to get sued, and you limit your liability for that. And so in there, it was assumed that we were all out here, that we were just wasteful with money, and that we just needed to be providing better care. And while there's always a few bad eggs everywhere, the most of us are limited by the amount of resources available to provide the level of care. It's not because I'm making a lot of money.
Mr. Webb.
So I'm confused. The city took on the state's rules, but it's the same 12 people, but you're dealing with the same 12 people, but under different rules that got angry?
It was in the process, like their attitude towards providers is just disrespectful. So when they come up and we sit on work groups to talk about things, they're very disrespectful to the muni, which that's their issue, and disrespectful to the code, but then to providers in general.
Wait, so you're inspected by the city and the state?
No.
Let's clarify what she's talking about, because are you saying that the state, working with the state specialists, has been challenging, not
Yes.
the muni specialists?
No.
Just want to make sure that we clarify that.
Why? Because I sit on work groups to talk about how to improve quality child care around the state.
Oh, but they're not inspecting your operation?
No, they're not. No. It's but as they're coming through, and I think that attitude's come down. So when they're coming up with new regs now, their attitude is that we don't understand, that we're incompetent, that a lot of attitudes that you're just a bunch, watching babysitting. And so when you ask clarifying, like they put out a new regs, and they're like, well, you should figure it out. And I said, I understand that means I'm going to have to print out state statute, print out your things, and figure out where you're going to change in. But I work 60 hours a week, and I have a family, and I'm not getting paid near as much as you are. And could you just say, this is what this is going to mean to us? And they won't. And then they wonder why we don't understand, or when they pass something, and then people are like, when did this come into effect? They're like, well, we put a public opening for public comment, but they didn't explain what that meant to us. And I own a business, or I run a business, and so it's my responsibility. But when we were under the muni, they just worked, and it was a more respectful relationship, because we all want to provide good quality care for children.
So, Mr. Peterson, before I get to you, but unless I'm misunderstanding, you're still under the muni.
We're still under the muni, but when the state code changes, which right now they've proposed a new one, or new changes to it, it impacts us. And where before we would have some open understanding of what that was, that's not their attitude. And having sat in meetings with them, I can see why, like, it just seems to be pervasive, that they just have the general disrespect for what we do, but then they're the ones coming up with the rules. And so again, this is just, it takes job satisfaction, and I'm not here for the money. I'm here because I want to provide this high quality space for these children who are spending, and my kids here in the center spend 50 to 60 hours a week with us because their parents are professionals and they work those hours. And so that is, we've never seen a generation of children who are spending their formative years in group care situations. And we want to make sure that that is as high quality as possible, because that's a substantial amount of time to be housed. And that's only if you can get in. We fill up a year in advance. I'm full through September of 2019.
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so it sounds to me like the state's just assuming that child care people here in Anchorage are doing an inferior job.
They will say that.
Yeah, well, sorry to hear that. You mentioned here toward the end of this page that blanket training requirements are ridiculous.
That was Tia.
Right.
Yeah.
So what requirements are ridiculous that she's talking about? Do you have any idea?
So I think in some of the issue that's coming up is that the goal of the state, and I sat on some of the work groups for the Learning Grow program, and I fought to have some of these requirements put in because I've seen it improve the quality of care that we offer. So I am not anti, regulations, anti these quality improvements, but I also, before they moved to the new Learning Grow, our center would get in $8,000 from THREAD through pass-through funds to improve, plus training and coaching, plus the state had passed a small-term wage incentive for our staff who would earn their CDAs. So we would get another $12,000 to $20,000 of that a year. So it was like $20,000 a time. With the new program coming in, all that money is gone. And if I qualify for the next one, step up, all I'm going to get back is $1,000. And it's costing our parents because we're trying to move it because there's a big PR push to move up your Learning Grow levels. And we're trying to do that. And I'm sitting with the budget and we're going over and I'm like, and this is what this costs us. So it's increasing the cost of parents and we've lost what we previously were receiving. So I think some of those things, but again, I 100% support and fought to get those in there, but we've increased the expectations with no funding for that. And it's been incredibly difficult. It's been near impossible for us to meet that because, and that's the thing, is parents can't afford to pay more.
Mr. Train.
Just, Mr. Chairman, this is just an indication of what the state's doing. They have no money. So they're cutting back every program out there. We used to pass the money down to these organizations, out of the city. We're not doing that. The state has got to get their fiscal house in order. This is affecting cities and small daycares like this. It's affecting the state without the state legislature realizing what they're doing. They can pass their laws, but they don't send the funding down to implement them. Whether it's you or it's a school district, it's the same problem in the state right now.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. So if you will stay, I think we'll have a brief conversation with Ms. Berglund. And again, I plan to have more than just this work session. Hopefully we have more going forward, and perhaps an ordinance will come out of that, and there are places the municipality can make a positive change. If not, then at least we can have this conversation in public, and maybe the state will have a better sense of what they're doing. So we're going to go, we started late, so we're going to go a little bit past 3:30.
I would probably have to step out and go pick up my kids.
Oh, ironically, Ms. LaFrance must understandably go pick up her children.
Yeah, I think if that comes up. This needs
Okay. So there you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Dunbar and members of the Assembly. I'm Stephanie Berglund, and I'm the CEO of THREAD. We are Alaska's Child Care Resource and Referral Network. And also by way of introduction, I want to say that I'm proud to work with Melinda Freeman. I am a member of the Department Health and Human Services Commission, so and a proud supporter of the important work of the public health and social services happening here in the city. Thank you for inviting us to be here today. I'm not going to talk a lot about THREAD services, but just so you're broadly familiar with THREAD, I just want to say that we work toward a vision that all families have access to affordable and high quality early care and learning. We're a nonprofit organization here in Alaska. We actually started over 30 years ago, and this is a fun fact that we actually started right here in the municipality of Anchorage and spun off to a nonprofit just over 30 years ago. So we're happy to be here. We're now a statewide organization, and we work directly with families, with early childhood educators, with early childhood programs and communities to increase access to high quality early care and learning. So the issues that we've been talking about today are important because the youngest years are our most critical years. And we know now that with brain research that our brain develops most between the ages of 0 to 3, and our brain is 90% developed by the time we are 5. This is important because babies are developing important neural connections, as Christina was saying that Dad said earlier, and those connections can help babies either thrive or not. So several factors support this healthy development include a stable, loving, and nurturing family, and it's that environment that's consistent, predictable, and not stressful. So for many families and babies, we know that that's the love and care that they receive at home. And for many others, it's in addition to the community-based early care and learning program where they receive services. Many people often think of starting kindergarten at 5 or 6, and we're really working to reframe that because we know now that learning begins at birth. Children are learning no matter where they are, if they're at home or not at home, and they're learning critical skills that are helpful as they prepare for kindergarten and success in life. So it's important for us at THREAD to always say that we honor families as a child's first and most important teacher, but we know that more and more families are also relying on the help and support of their early care and education programs and have growing needs for those services in the community. There are 3 important levers that impact community-based childcare and early care and learning system success, and that's access, affordability, and quality, and you've already heard a lot of indication of that, so hopefully this will reinforce a lot of what we've already talked about. So access is a really big issue. I don't know, we've heard about some of the struggles already to find care, and you asked about the vacancy rate. I've yet to find a family who it's been easy for them to find quality child care, so I'm assuming that's one of the reasons that we're here talking about this issue today. We have a very large supply and demand issue. Of our population of young children under the age of 6, 60% of them have all of the adults in their household who are working. That's how we define the need for potentially community-based early care and learning. So most of them are served in the licensed child care centers or homes that Kathy talked about earlier. 66% of them are served in those licensed programs. The others are served in Head Start, Early Head Start, school district pre-Ks, military, and tribal child care, but a majority of them are served under the licensing jurisdiction of the municipality. This is an important slide. Hopefully you can see some of these numbers, but when you talked about the vacancy and the unmet need, we know for sure that 18% of children under age 6 have an unmet need for child care. This second yellow line, this 5,985, are children who are in, I think Mr. Peterson, somebody was saying, like, where they're maybe paying a family friend or neighbor
It's not regulated care, but they're in some type of care. So if you combine the unmet need plus the unlicensed care, about 50% of children do not have a regulated space for quality care in our city. In addition to the labor and childcare data that we have, we know from surveying Anchorage families and businesses that childcare is very hard to find. It impacts employment and is in very high demand. So we have a very large access issue. When we talk about affordability, the price are also key factors, and we've already heard a little bit of that from Christina. That families of young children are often at the beginning of their careers and at their lowest earning potential, yet they're paying more for childcare than a four-year college tuition here in Anchorage. Infant care in Anchorage averages about $1,000 a month, and for families with 2 children, like Christina said, that's their biggest family expense, more than their mortgage or their rent. So unlike college loans, there's little subsidy or support for quality early care and learning. When we look at how our sector is financed, we see that families are shouldering over 60% of the costs for that. So there's some federal dollars supporting that. You talked about some state dollars, but families are shouldering a majority of those costs. In Anchorage, we know that families spend on average 13% of their household income on childcare. And on the right side of the slide, you can see if they're from a single household, that they are likely paying a lot more than that as part of their household income. This compares to 7%, which is the target rate considered affordable by the U.S. Department of Health and Social Services. We talked about child care assistance. There is public assistance available for families in Anchorage. They can qualify by their income. Mr. Dunbar, you asked, the rate is set at eligibility, which is 85% or less of the state median income, and if they are in a qualifying activity of work, school, or training. Then it differentiates depending on the age of their child, the type of care setting they're in, so there's kind of a matrix of how that works.
Should I pause you there?
Yeah.
And you might not know something off your head. 85% of the median income, is that for the
Or
household
less.
or the 85?
It's for the household.
And
Yes.
so what is the median income for a household in Alaska, roughly?
I can get that for you. I don't have that.
So
What the 85% is in
of that.
Anchorage. Yeah.
I mean, interesting. Well, I just
Yeah.
think it illustrates, let's say it's $60,000, 85% of that is somewhere in the 50s, low 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're talking $1,000 a month. Now you're talking something approaching 20% of the total income of this household having to go to this one thing.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
I would just like to say, and so when I started my family, moved up here, I was on child care assistance, working in a program because you don't make as much. And then I got pregnant with the second child. And so it's only under that qualifiable time period, you have to be working or going to school. So in that meant that my maternity leave was 2 weeks because I had to pay for full cost of care, including because I needed to hold my infant spot for my son. I was paying 3 months of tuition for a spot that he wasn't even born yet, and then had to be back to work at 2 weeks so I can continue to getting the assistance because I had the one really good spot in a not high quality center, and I didn't want to lose that. So it was all these things, and then those situations, because they don't allow it if you end up in the hospital. So I've had grandparents raising kids and end up in the hospital and no longer working for surgery for 3 weeks and lose that child care assistance. But you're still paying tuition to hold that spot in the center. So it's things like this that impact because these are state run.
So there's work requirements as well
There
that
are.
are often
Mhm.
create sort of perverse incentives.
Yeah.
That's experience with most work requirements and most work programs.
Yeah. The good news is child care assistance did receive some policy changes in this last year that did increase support for family eligibility, so that has been positive. So the message here that it's expensive, and even it's not just for really a low income issue, it's really expensive, I think, regardless of the at all economic levels. The tricky thing about
I'm sorry, Mr. Babb?
Sorry, it's 80,600 or 80,862 is the median.
Thank you. Go on.
Christina already talked about this next note, but the really tricky thing about price and cost is that businesses providing early care and learning services, have a hard time making ends meet, despite how high the price is for families. So we know that the true cost of providing high quality care exceeds what often the market can bear. So that is what leads me to talk about quality. The quality of our early care and learning is spotty, I would say, and often not well defined or differentiated. I want you to think back to your early years and think about what was influential to you, even in elementary school. And while it may be recess or your friends, most people would agree that it was maybe a teacher or a caring adult in your life. And that same caring, influential person who is needed in early childhood, somebody who's consistent, who's nurturing and provides guidance, and is a quality early educator.
Mr. Trainee, you have a question?
Yeah.
Mr. Dunbar, ma'am, how are FAS children factored in here? Because FAS children, if you don't catch them when they're young, we end up catching them in the school district, then it's an even bigger problem. So do we have a separate chart that will indicate the additional costs for dealing with FAS children? Because we have a lot of them.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So I am just broadly addressing all issues that all families face. Christina alluded to that. I think the issues become even more complex for families who have children with special needs. So we all partner very closely with early intervention services and the school district for special needs services. But you're exactly right. The earlier that we can intervene, the better, and helps to reduce some of those costs later on. So it's even more important to have high quality early childhood professionals who have the skills to help with recognizing some of those signs of child development and supporting families and how to get the resources that they need.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson, we'll just,
I know just
5 minutes left.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, are there some child care centers that specialize in handling children with special needs?
Yes, Denali Family Services, a lot of our mental health will have specialized programs, but they're not full-day services. I mean, I think that's some of the things you look at when you start getting to higher quality, like Head Start, and some of them are low full days, but like the Denali Family Services isn't full day. And so when we get to looking at how you support children, we'll talk about often is that the expulsion rates for children in early childhood, because if children aren't able to, if you don't have high quality teachers, if you don't have a good high quality program, they tend to show more behavioral problems. Or even if you do have a high quality program and you have things going on in your body and you're trying to learn how to regulate in a full day program with 12 other peers or 10, 11 other peers, you will start having behavioral problems. And so having those supports, which is why like the learning things that Fred is working on, help lower those expulsion rates, because children need to be supported in the environments that they're in. Because continually moving them from program to program, or parents losing their jobs because they're having to be called to pick up their children, is not good for anybody.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
Stephanie.
So this is the challenge of providing intensive services for any child, and especially for children with special needs, is this field very generally is attracting a low-skilled entry-level workforce because of the low pay. That's really hard then to expect them to have the training and qualifications needed to care for our youngest community members. So that highly impacts the quality of care that we are able to see across the community.
It's nowhere near living wage.
No.
No.
It's like less
So-
than half the living wage now.
The quality of early childhood is important. Mr. Trainee, this gets to your notion as well, not only for children with special needs, but for all children. As defined by the State Department of Education and Early Development, 28% of our entering kindergarten are prepared for school. So quality early childhood is important so that we can assist them in getting the necessary skills, social emotional support and development needed for their success. I'll quickly just highlight my last few slides, just emphasizing that this industry has an important economic impact in our community. While there's certainly not enough of care that we talked about is needed, it's providing $500 million of economic activity in our state and allows $2 billion to be earned from families who have access to quality early care and learning. So there's a large economic driver to this. And to the point we just made as well, we know that investing early has the greater return of cost benefit of return on investment as well. So I'm going to stop there. I have 2 solution slides that I'm happy to talk about. Christina talked about 2 programs that Fred is managing, and one is called Learn and Grow, and the other is Seed. You have a handout of both of those, and they really focus on how we're supporting individuals to strengthen the workforce through compensation supports and professional development and scholarships, and the other is how we're supporting programs as building on licensing as a foundation, how we're helping them improve the quality and focus on quality indicators.
Mr. Weddle.
Where does your money come from?
So we receive, we're a nonprofit, so we receive a lot of money from the state, but from a federal pass-through. We all are supported from the same federal child care and development block grant. It's a block grant that supports child care across the country, and we receive a small portion of what's considered a quality arm to help improve the quality across the state. But we also receive foundation dollars, corporate dollars, and individual support.
Thank you. So we're coming towards the end of when I think it's acceptable for us to go over what we were noticed. I think, so you've got 2 solution slides here, and under your second solution slide it says community benefits, community systems regulations, incentive for more programs. I think my intention is to continue this conversation. I want to reach out to the Anchorage Association for Education for Young Children. Actually, Christina, if you had a chance to speak with them as well, or tell them I'm looking for them, I'd appreciate it. And the next work session on this topic, I think, unless my colleagues want to disagree with me, that the problem, not all the contours of the problem, but the existence of the problem, I think, is clear to us. And so now we can get into the step of trying to drill down and find solutions that are perhaps acceptable to the industry and to the regulators as well. Although I assume that there's going to be at least some conflict there. So we can end that one on that today, and just understand that I intend to have at least one and probably several more work sessions going forward. And perhaps at some point later in the summer there will be the opportunity for another ordinance. Any other closing statements, Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After seeing this presentation, it makes me think that statewide pre-K would be a very good thing. And I think that would solve several areas where there might be problems in this situation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Peterson. On that note, work session is closed.